Thank you for being a part of this important conversation at OneJax. We are always interested in bringing the community together to listen to one another, but especially during the time of COVID-19, we're committed to bringing community leaders together that will offer insight and help us remain together and learning and thriving as a community in this time. So we're so glad that you would join us on this Zoom podcast.
So you just heard from Kyle Reese, our Deputy Director. I'm Nancy Broner, Executive Director of OneJax. And I want to introduce our two guests today for this conversation. Two community leaders, Nina Waters, President of the Community Foundation for Northeast Florida. Welcome, Nina.
Thank you.
And David Miller, Co-Founder and Executive Chairman of Brightway Insurance. And David, we're glad to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. And Nina, let's start with you. During the uncertainty of these times with this crisis, what do you see nonprofits doing in this trying time where most people are working from home? Really, we're in a pandemic. What are you hearing from nonprofits?
Well, we do have several nonprofits that are considered essential, such as all the feeding nonprofits like Feeding Northeast Florida and the Food Bank. So we do have some that are essential. I think the challenge for nonprofits during a time like this, a time of crisis, is that their need increases as funding decreases. And so whereas restaurants don't have as many people coming, other businesses, it really ramps up for nonprofits. So there's more phone calls, there are more people that are needy. There are people that never had to access services that are trying to access those services. So it makes it really difficult. Also, trying to work remotely is hard for nonprofits because they're very front-facing and people-facing. So that is really what we do as a sector. Yeah. And so nonprofits have done some really, really creative things. You know, Communities in Schools is a program that is really in the schools. Well, schools right now are remote. So Communities in Schools took their workers and then put them on the buses helping to deliver food to school children. Such an amazing idea that our superintendent had to make the buses deliver the food. The Communities in Schools are serving as those volunteers. The other challenge that we're seeing with our nonprofits is most of them work with a lot of volunteers. That's how they keep their costs down. Well, because of social distancing and because a lot of the volunteers are older, the volunteers aren't able to come out and help. So there are truckloads of food that can't be unloaded, for example, because there aren't people to do that. So the volunteering, the lack of volunteers is a really big problem for being able to deliver services, but also hitting the bottom line, which makes the nonprofits workers have to work longer hours.
Yeah, and I suppose you're hearing a lot of fears from nonprofits on how they're going to function going into the future when we don't know what the timeline of this pandemic will bring.
We are. So we have, with 4 other foundations or philanthropies, have started back up, reactivated the First Coast Relief Fund, Florida's First Coast Relief Fund. And what we're really hearing from the nonprofits, we've had 3 rounds of grants. We do 1 round a week, is they don't even know the extent, just like businesses, they don't know the extent of how this is going to affect them. This will be a long-term fund for supporting nonprofits. The good thing is, though, nonprofits also qualify for a lot of the federal aid that's come down for small businesses. Nonprofits fit into that as well. So the Nonprofit Center has done a great job, and the Florida Nonprofit Network, educating nonprofits how to actually apply for those specific services and relief that is in the different acts that have come down from Washington.
Great.
David, you have been very generous to many organizations in the community, OneJax being one of those. Thank you very much. And as a donor and as a philanthropist, what are you hearing from organizations that you support, or maybe more to the point, what do you want to hear from organizations that you support?
Well, I think, it's interesting as this is sort of, as it's unfolded, we've seen there was the initial phase of kind of shock and awe where everyone was just trying to understand. And I think the organizations were trying to understand, people and donors were trying to understand what it meant. Many people I talked to initially started with it's almost like a ready, shoot, aim. And let's just start, and what can we do? And I think the smartest things I've seen, and as I've seen, and by the way, the work that the Community Foundation's doing, the United Way with the First Coast Relief Fund, so many different organizations are doing really smart and important work right now. And I think they're helping us as donors, as citizens, as neighbors, be our best selves. I think the things we need to think about is being strategic and supporting the organizations that are best equipped to handle each of the different missions that are there. It's really important because, you know, there are only so many resources to go around, and making sure that we're in a place where we're using our resources smartly, critically important. The other thing, you know, I think is, you know, more fundamentally, we all are thinking about, you know, one of the fundamental things that I know everyone shares is a sense of fear. We all face it, you know, when these things happen. And I think not letting fear cause you to be paralyzed, but rather allowing that to inspire you to reach out, to question, to talk. The organizations that I'm working with and talking to, I'm really pleased. I'm seeing some really good behaviors, a lot of talking, a lot of asking, a lot of sharing of information. And so I think the more that we all do that, the better, you know, the better off we're going to be.
Well, this may be our first pandemic, but it's not our first crisis moments as leaders of nonprofits and as donors. For either one of you, what have the previous crises taught you, and how are they informing you? Whether it be 9/11 or hurricanes or the disastrous economy of 2008, what are some lessons that you've learned through that you're carrying with you in these days?
I think for us as a foundation, what we've learned is that we need to be much more flexible, especially at times like this. And so what we've done in forming the Relief Fund, it's 5 organizations, and the United Way of Northeast Florida, the United Way of St. Johns County, the Jacksonville Jewish Federation and Foundation, the Community Foundation, and the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund. We formed one fund, so there's not a lot of donor confusion. We learned that from the Pulse nightclub massacre, because Orlando started several funds and there was a lot of donor confusion. And so we learned that from Boston and other places, that one fund that the city supports, the mayor's fully behind it, makes it less confusing. The other thing that we've learned is that people need to give to the organizations that they care about deeply as well. So we're not saying give to the Relief Fund, we're saying both and. Give to those organizations you care about deeply, give a little more generously right now, and the Relief Fund is one way to give collectively, where you're then spreading those dollars among many, many more agencies in the 6-county area, things that you might not know about. And so it's really a both and. And so I think we've learned a lot about how to approach donors, how to talk about what those needs are. I think to David's point, you have to stay calm. You know, you cannot allow yourself to be caught up in all of the immense amount of need. You just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and you have to really find new ways of doing work. And that's what we've really seen back with the hurricanes, and now people working together collaboratively in ways that they haven't, sharing resources, sharing buildings, sharing staff, and also being able to talk to donors in a real way about what's happening. You really have to, as a nonprofit, be able to communicate, if you were not here, what would happen? So you have to paint that picture for donors. But for us, this would not happen. And I think that all nonprofits have those examples, especially the ones that we're talking about, the safety net nonprofits that are really on the front lines right now. And I think that's critically important to do. And I think our nonprofits have learned a lot about how to do that.
David?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's unlike all of the different things that we faced, you know, as I think back to 9/11, I think back to hurricanes, certainly in the insurance business, we deal with those on a all too regular basis. unlike those, this situation really is different. And it's different because it's caused us to have to really adapt in ways, our lives, our thinking, and innovate in ways that we didn't have to before. All of the other type events that we deal with and that we're faced with, we're all able to work in ways that we're used to working to affect change. Here, we're really having to think about that, and not only about how we give back, but you know, when you're a business, so many businesses had to immediately respond and change the way they operate. Restaurants had to change. Concert promoters had to change the way they operate. All businesses, how we're dealing with social distancing and communicating in different kinds of ways. So that adaptability is really important. And then the other message I think that to me is important is, you know, people think about philanthropy in terms of giving money. And that is certainly one way, but philanthropy is so much more than just giving money. Different people, everyone can give in different ways. And the question is not, can I give, but how can I give? And how do I feel best about? My son, who's, you know, a millennial, you know, we had these kind of conversations, and for him, it's about working online and digital media and connecting people and resources. And he's been able to work and do it in a way that feels true to him. Just as though Nina said, you know, you think about the organizations that you feel close to and champion them and support them generously. But I think the opportunity is to think about how can we help in different ways than we had traditionally thought about. And I think that's very exciting. It unlocks our human spirit and what's best about us, and in ways that we haven't been challenged in the past. And I think it's going to allow us to exit from this eventually in a much stronger, much better place.
I think the other thing that's really key is that this pandemic, each community is on their own. So there aren't other communities coming in and helping us to any extent, really. There aren't other countries coming in and helping the U.S. because we're trying to take care of ourselves. So it's going to mean that this 6-county area has to depend on each other, and we have to find ways to work together to make that happen, because there aren't going to be dollars that coming from outside other than the federal government dollars. You know, there aren't a lot of people coming in that can help in our hospitals. There aren't safety people coming in. We're really on our own. And so we have to really work together in a way that we haven't had to around the other crisis situations. Our entire country, our entire world is being challenged right now.
Mm-hmm. One of the things you said earlier, Nina, was that nonprofits are people facing. And so this is a particular challenge at this time. And David, you touched on this issue in a different way, but I will say it called just isolation. We don't do isolation very well as a society, as a culture, and particularly the nonprofit sector, because we are people facing. And one of the things that we're all hearing is when the crisis abates to some degree, whenever that might be, in whatever way it happens, it's going to take a while for people to trust again, to get together, to not be in this fearful, isolated mode. Do either of you have thoughts about how we encourage people? This is in a personal relationships and also with our nonprofit sector. How do we get people back connected again after such an extended period of isolation?
Well, I think the nonprofit sector, the faith community, universities, I think they're really key in helping to get the community connected back together again. Although I will say that people are connected now, they're just connected in different ways. So it's not as personal necessarily, but I've seen people doing family reunions on Zoom, for example, or, you know, getting in touch with relatives they haven't been in touch with forever. Like we're eating lunch together every day with Zoom for our office. So whoever wants to drop in, you know, can do that. So I think people are learning different ways to communicate. What I think is the best thing is that families are connecting in a way they haven't connected in a long time. And they're having to sit around the dinner table together, and parents are with their children more, and husbands and wives are together more. And I think that's really important. So I think that this is a time for us to really focus on those that are closest to us and those that we care for a lot. And then I think we'll be better people and better prepared to go out into the community and give 100% of ourselves to others. I will say the mental health challenges of this period concern me significantly, because we have a lot of people that are very isolated. And I think that mental health organizations and nonprofits that work in those areas are thinking of different ways that they can reach out to individual people and address some of the mental health concerns that are really being driven by this issue. But I think for me, that's, you know, my biggest concern as we move forward is how do we address that. But I think we'll be kinder, gentler people when we emerge from this, and I think we'll have a different way, I really do, of relating to each other that's much healthier than the way pre-COVID-19.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Nina. I think the question isn't how do we either force or how do we get people to want to go back to the way things were, but really think about how we're going to leverage this this opportunity to come out of it a better community and a better society. I think that's the real question. I think many families have found and friend groups that there are new ways to connect, and we realize from a mental health perspective, as you said, there are going to be real challenges because people who aren't being intentional about setting up meetings to specifically talk to people that they just happen to run past in the past. I think that's really important, and something that I know many people that I connect with on a regular basis are being more intentional about. You know, setting specific times and using the opportunities, meal times, morning rituals, evening rituals, exercise rituals, all these things to really connect with people. I think that's something that we're going to have to, we'll be able to take from this and be able to leverage and make our communities better going forward.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that is so impressive about both of you is not only your leadership ability, but your critical and deep thinking skills. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering, and we all look forward to brighter tomorrows, but today it's a difficult time for so many. And I'm wondering, for the two of you, where are you finding strength? What resources are nourishing your souls through this time?
Well, from my standpoint, the people who I've been friends with in the past, having ability to really connect in deeper ways and talk about these things and draw strength from. My faith is a piece. My family and the connections that we're having, I think, is tremendous. You know, we all operate in different bubbles and different spheres as we go through our daily lives. You know, we have our business lives, our community lives, our family lives, and each one informs the other. I think, you know, seeing the trials and tribulations of people in our business for me has been incredibly impactful, and how we've been able to work together to not only help each other who we work together on a daily basis, but how we're able to help our broader communities together as well, and leveraging that. I think, you know, focusing on that and what we can do rather than the isolation and the negativity, going towards the light, I think is tremendously empowering. And it's made a huge difference in my life. And I know as I share with other people, you know, we all have our moments. But having a fabric of friends, resources, and that you depend on, I think makes all the difference in the world.
Nina?
I agree with everything David said. He is so wise. For me, I'm doing a lot more exercising. So I usually work really long hours and not at home. So I work at the office, or I have night events, a lot of charity events. And so this has given me the opportunity to really spend more time walking, doing Pilates, kind of just being a little more introspective and being by myself a little bit more, which I have to say has been really healthy for me because I'm not usually alone. And so I've really actually enjoyed that time. And at first it was really, really uncomfortable. And then I really started to really say, hey, I really do like being with me a little bit more. And so I hope that I won't forget this when this is over, and I'll be able to remember what that balance brought to me. So I think that's important. And I do think connecting to our team a little bit more deeply and differently than we have before, just understanding, that we're all in this together and sharing, what good we feel we can do in the community and how that's impacting each one of us. And then how do we support each other during this really challenging time and the unknown? At least with a hurricane, the day it's going to hit and when it's going to be over. I mean, we don't know when this is going to be over. And so I think that's the uncertainty has really been challenging, especially for people with young children, because this is affecting young children in a way that I would have never thought about. But it's really scaring them, and it's really, they don't understand it. And so it's really been hard for parents. And so how do we support them, through this time? I'm really lucky I don't have young children. So, I'm learning a lot from those that do.
Well, what is it, the Mr. Rogers quote, always look for the helpers. I mean, just what Duval County Public Schools have been able to do in a relatively short time to create an online environment really is encouraging and gives us hope and something to celebrate. Any other thoughts that we haven't gotten to in our conversation today that you want to share?
I think you had really good questions, and it was really an honor to be on here with David. I admire his work and what Brightway's doing, so really love to hear from him. So thank you.
You're too kind. The three of you are friends, and I think about the how grateful I am for mostly the people in my life. They're the people, my dry cleaner, the restaurants that I go to, and the people who are working so hard and right now getting kind of so little, just doing takeout business. The groups that I typically get together with. And I just, one thing I'm grateful for is living in Florida right now, where we're not in tiny little apartments in freezing weather. I'm just grateful for that every day. And, but mostly, I feel like we're going to get through this. And there's absolutely no doubt. And rather than focus on the end and what's the end, I think it's really about every day. And the more that we focus on living the best days we can, we're going to end up in a great place. But the more that we focus on those kind of things, living the values that are important to us, we're going to end up fine together. And I'm just so grateful for my relationships with all of you and the great work you do. You're brilliant. Your hearts are strong. And together we're going to get through this.
Thank you so much, Nina and David. Your leadership in our community has been so appreciated, and we can see why. When in times of crisis, you two shine in terms of providing a steady hand. So thank you for sharing your time today, and we wish the best for you and your families as we weather this pandemic.
You as well.
Thank you.
And so as we close our time, we do want to give a special thanks to our Assistant Director of Operations, JC Wilbach, who makes Nancy and me look good on a regular basis.
Stop.
But it's certainly making sure that this Zoom podcast is what we want it to be. So JC, thank you. And again, David, Nina, thank you so much for your wisdom and for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Bye-bye.
You too.